CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris is in Washington. Steve, what can you tell us about this move?
Well, it's interesting. I think we had a feeling that Pence was going to have a larger role as Donald Trump's right-hand man, and now we're seeing it in terms of the transition. You know, Christie was tapped to run the transition when they formed the transition committee over the summer. Basically, you know, getting lists of people, doing some initial vetting on potential folks who could serve in Trump's administration. But now they're in a new phase after the election, after he wins, and now they're really ramping this phase up. There's 70 days until the inauguration, and they got to get these positions filled. So they're tapping a guy like Pence, who has that Washington experience and has the connections in Washington, and then put all these other folks as vice chairs. I mean, people that we've seen really that are really loyal Donald Trump supporters. They were out there campaigning on his behalf. People like Christie, people like Ben Carson, Newt Gingrich, General Mike Flynn, Rudy Giuliani, Jeff Sessions. They're all going to be involved in this. And then there's another layer of people that are involved in this transition team. People who were on his campaign staff, people who other supporters, his family members, including his son-in-law Jared Kushner. So there are, you know, basically everybody who surrounded him is going to be involved in this transition. But they've elevated Pence as the guy who's really spearheading this effort to find folks to work in Trump's administration.
Steve, I'm curious how much of this has to do with Bridgegate, where two of Chris Christie's aides were found guilty for using the closing of GW Bridge, a particular exit, for political retaliation for not backing Governor Christie's re-election campaign. Does any of this bode horribly for him and his future prospects of working in a Trump administration?
I mean, I'm sure that controversy is not going to help Christie if he's trying to find a gig as a cabinet member. I mean, there might be other roles for him in the White House that wouldn't be necessarily an impediment for it. But you know, trying to get through the Senate and Senate confirmation with that in his background might be tough. I do think that probably that has part to do with this, but Mike Pence is a guy who knows Washington. He knows these players. They've got to ramp up very, very quickly, and so Christie may have been the guy that got the research done in the run-up, but for somebody who's going to implement this process, they're really going to more of the insider type. And look, this also speaks to one of the reasons why they brought Mike Pence aboard in the beginning. I mean, we remember when he picked Pence as his running mate, one of the reasons why they brought him on was to really be a bridge to those establishment Republicans, to inside the Beltway Republicans, and to really calm the fears of some of those Republicans who were worried about the idea of Trump as the nominee. Well, now you have Trump as the president-elect, and so putting a guy like Pence in a higher profile role and a much more hands-on role to deal with this process of getting ready to be president of the United States, it just sort of makes more sense to have him in there than have somebody like Christie, who doesn't have the Washington experience necessarily and is sort of a damaged goods based on the Bridgegate scandal.
Steve, we know George W. Bush relied heavily on his vice president, Dick Cheney. Do you think we're going to see a similar relationship dynamic here with Trump and Pence?
I'd be shocked if we don't. I mean, this seems to be a signal that that's the direction they're going. Keep in mind, Donald Trump has zero political experience. He has zero Washington experience. And so while he may you know, be a self-styled CEO and delegate to others, and that's how he's run his business as this sort of man at the top, but he has other people doing a lot of the detailed work, that seems to be the role that Pence might be falling into here. It was what we thought could happen if Trump won, and now that we're seeing this elevation to this role of running the transition, I think that's probably a signal that this is likely what Pence's situation will be in a Trump administration, as somebody he's going to go to for a lot of the detail work, for a lot of the policy work, for dealing with Capitol Hill and others around Washington.
Steve Chaggaris from our Washington Bureau. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Rena.